Imagine a fortress built not of stone but of human flesh. Its foundations are dug deep into the soil of ego, and its walls are cemented with the blood of those who dared to speak the truth. You look at history and see dates and maps.
By 1780,
You see lines drawn in the sand by treaties and wars.
this route through
But the elite observer sees something else entirely. They see the terrifying fragility of civilization when it is placed in the hands of a man who cannot rule his own biology. To understand the mechanics of power, you must first understand the collapse of discipline. Most men are slaves to their impulses, but they lack the leverage to inflict their chaos upon the world. A peasant with a wandering eye destroys a marriage. A king with a wandering eye destroys a religion and redraws the map of a continent. Watching the life of Henry VIII is not merely a history lesson. It is a masterclass in how a single chaotic psyche can dismantle 1,000 years of tradition. This is the secret mechanics of tyranny. When the barrier between a leader's private lust and public policy dissolves, the state becomes nothing more than a weaponized extension of his ID. The year is 1509. Henry represents the apex of potential. He is 18 years old. He is athletic and scholarly and devout. The world looks at him and sees a philosopher king in the making. He is the golden prince of Christendom. But beneath the velvet and the gold lies a dangerous seed of narcissism that has never been denied water. He believes the world exists to reflect his glory back to him. This is the first lesson of the dark triad. Charisma is often just a mask for a deep and insatiable hunger for validation. The psychology of the young king is defined by the sudden acquisition of absolute agency. He was the second son. He was the spare. He was never meant to hold the crown, and thus he was never truly broken by the discipline required to wear it.
But for Henry,
When his brother Arthur died, Henry inherited a destiny that was too large for his character. He took the throne with the belief that his will was synonymous with God's will.
it was here
This cognitive distortion is the hallmark of the tyrant.
that Henry first
It is not that he lies to others. It is that he genuinely cannot distinguish between his desires and the moral good. The pivot point of English history rests on a biological failure. Catherine of Aragon acts as the immovable object to Henry's irresistible force. She is the daughter of monarchs and a woman of iron conviction. But she cannot give him a son. In the mind of the king, this is not a biological accident. It is a divine judgment. His anxiety regarding the succession is not just political. It is deeply personal. It is a question of his virility and his legacy. A king without a son is a man who has failed his primary function. Enter Anne Boleyn. She is not the most beautiful woman at court, but she is the most intelligent player of the game. She understands the economics of scarcity. She refuses to be his mistress. She demands the capital of a crown. In a normal man, this refusal would lead to frustration and eventually indifference. In a narcissist like Henry, it breeds obsession. The denial of his desire makes the object of that desire infinitely more valuable. He must have her not because he loves her, but because he cannot bear the thought that there is something in this world he cannot possess.
we must press the advantage.
This is where the psychology of the individual collides with the geopolitics of Europe. To marry Anne, he must annul his marriage to Catherine. To annul his marriage, he must secure the permission of Pope Clement VII. But the Pope is a prisoner of the Holy Roman Emperor, who happens to be Catherine's nephew. The geopolitical board is locked. A rational operator would seek a compromise or a new alliance. Henry does neither. He decides to break the board entirely. The separation from Rome is often painted as a theological revolution. It was not. It was a hostile takeover. Henry looked at the church and saw a rival corporation that held assets he wanted and authority he despised. By declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England, he nationalized the soul of the country. This is the terrifying efficiency of the sociopath. He does not negotiate with institutions. He absorbs them. He rewrote the spiritual laws of a nation simply to facilitate a wedding. Consider the implications of this shift. For centuries, the legitimacy of a king was derived from the church. By severing that link, Henry declared that power generates its own legitimacy. He told his subjects that their salvation flowed through him. This is the ultimate consolidation of power. He controlled their taxes. He controlled their laws. And now he controlled their path to heaven. All of this because he lacked the impulse control to accept a denial. Once the dam breaks, there is no holding back the flood. The execution of Thomas More is the signal that the old world is dead. More was the conscience of the kingdom. He was a man of intellect and integrity. Henry killed him not because More was a threat, but because More's silence was an insult to Henry's ego. The tyrant cannot abide indifference. He requires total submission. If you do not validate his delusion, you are an enemy of the state. The rise of Thomas Cromwell marks the industrialization of this terror. Cromwell is the perfect technocrat. He is the cold mechanic who keeps the machine running while the madman steers. He drafts the legislation that turns the king's whims into statutes. He dissolves the monasteries and funnels their vast wealth into the royal coffers. This is the greatest transfer of wealth in English history. It buys the loyalty of the aristocracy. They are complicit in the theft, and therefore they are bound to the thief. But the lust that drove this revolution soon turns to ash. Anne Boleyn fails to provide the son. The very traits that attracted Henry the wit and the independence and the fire now repel him. He projects his own insecurities onto her. If she is clever enough to seduce a king, she is clever enough to betray him. The paranoia sets in. The accusation of incest and witchcraft is absurd to the rational mind, but it makes perfect sense to the narcissist. It justifies his discarding of her. It makes him the victim. The sword falls on her neck in May of 1536. The king does not mourn. He is already looking at Jane Seymour. The pattern repeats. This is the compulsion loop. The dopamine hit of the new conquest fades and is replaced by the anxiety of maintenance. He cannot sustain a relationship because he cannot view women as human beings. They are accessories to his glory. When they malfunction, they are discarded. As the years grind on, the Golden Prince begins to rot. A jousting accident in 1536 leaves him with a leg wound that never heals. The ulcer festers and stinks. He can no longer exercise. The athletic body turns to massive obesity. He is in constant pain. This physical decay mirrors his psychological disintegration. The pain makes him irritable and unpredictable. The court walks on eggshells. To speak is to risk death. To remain silent is to risk suspicion. The execution of Thomas Cromwell is perhaps the most revealing moment of this era. Cromwell had delivered everything Henry asked for. He made him rich. He made him absolute. But Cromwell arranged a marriage with Anne of Cleves that Henry found physically repulsive. The king's lack of attraction was treated as treason. Cromwell was beheaded because Henry felt humiliated. There is no gratitude in the mind of the tyrant. People are tools. When a tool blunts, it is melted down. The later years of Henry's reign are a study in senile despotism. He marries Catherine Howard, who is 30 years his junior. He is trying to capture his lost youth. He wants to believe he is still the virile prince of the Renaissance. When she is found to have a past and a present with other men, the illusion shatters. The rage is apocalyptic. He does not just kill her. He kills her lovers. He kills her family. He enacts a bill of attainder to make it legal to kill a mad woman without trial. The law is no longer a shield for the people. It is a sword for the king's mood swings. He bankrupts the treasury, fighting pointless wars in France. He debases the currency. He leaves the economy in ruins. He destroys the very wealth he stole from the church. This is the tragedy of absolute power without absolute discipline. The resources of a nation are burned to warm the vanity of one man. He builds magnificent palaces while the streets of London fill with beggars. He creates a legacy of stone and blood, but leaves a kingdom that is structurally unsound. We must step back and look at the map. The isolation of England was an accidental masterstroke. By burning his bridges with Rome and the Catholic powers of Europe, Henry forced England to look to the sea. He invested in the navy not because he had a vision of empire, but because he was paranoid about invasion. The Great Harry and the coastal forts were built to protect his schism. Yet this paranoia laid the keel for the British Empire. It is a dark irony that the global dominance of the English-speaking world can be traced back to a king's inability to keep it in his pants. The break from Rome created a distinct English identity. It forced the nation to become self-reliant. It created a class of new men who owed their status to the crown rather than the church. These men would become the architects of the modern state. The psychological flaw of the leader became the founding stone of the nation's future strength. But the cost was spiritual devastation. The monasteries were not just banks. They were the hospitals and the schools and the welfare system of the medieval world. When Henry smashed them, he destroyed the social safety net. The poor were left to rot. The art and the libraries were lost. The cultural heritage of centuries was wiped out in a decade. We celebrate the Tudor era as a time of glamour, but for the average person it was a time of anxiety and displacement. The lesson here is one of scale. A man's character is his fate, but a king's character is his people's fate. Henry's lack of impulse control did not just ruin his life. It warped the psyche of a nation. It taught the English that authority could be arbitrary. It taught them that truth was malleable. It planted the seeds of the civil wars that would follow a century later. The chaos he unleashed did not die with him. Henry dies in January of 1547. He is 55 years old, but his body is that of an 80-year-old man. He is a mass of corruption and infection. He weighs nearly 400 pounds. He is held together by bandages and the fear of his attendants. Even on his deathbed, he is terrifying. No one dares to tell him he is dying, because to predict the king's death is treason. He dies in a fog of delusion, still believing he is the good shepherd of his people. He leaves behind a child king, a fanatically Protestant council, and a realm divided against itself. His obsession with a male heir gave him Edward VI, a sickly boy who would die 6 years later. The irony is absolute. The daughter he discarded, Elizabeth, would go on to be the greatest monarch in English history. The son he sacrificed everything for was a footnote. The universe has a cruel sense of humor when it comes to the plans of narcissists. When you look at the portrait of Henry by Holbein, you see the projection of power. You see the broad shoulders and the defiant stance. You see the codpiece and the jewels. It is an image designed to intimidate. It says, "I am the state," but now you know how to look deeper. You see the small, cruel eyes. You see the tight mouth of a man who is never satisfied. You see a man who is a prisoner of his own appetites. The story of Henry VIII is not a romance. It is a warning. It is a testament to the danger of connecting the infinite power of the state to the finite and flawed wiring of the human brain. We like to believe that history is driven by great forces and economic trends, but often it is driven by the simplest and darkest of things. A man feels insecure. A man wants a woman he cannot have. A man feels pain and wants to lash out. When you seek power in your own life, remember the bloated king. Remember that external control is meaningless without internal command. You can build a fortress. You can rewrite the laws. You can cut the heads off your enemies. But if you cannot govern your own impulses, you are nothing more than a slave with a crown. The true empire is the one within. Conquering the world is easy compared to conquering yourself. The elite operator understands that the ultimate leverage is discipline. While others are reacting to their base instincts, you must remain cold. You must remain detached. You must see the board for what it is. Do not let your hunger become your history.